Welcome to the Oscoda Township Regular Board Meeting, November 27th. Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Cummings.
Here, yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Here.
Mr. Gasky.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Byer.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. Next for agenda additions or changes. Do we have any?
We do not.
All right, then I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move we approve the agenda.
Support. Motion by Ms. McGuire, supported by Mr. Gajewski. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is set. Next is public hearing for the fiscal year 2018 proposed operating budget for the township. For this public hearing, anyone can speak during this time. There's a 4-minute time limit. And I guess I'll make a motion that we go into public hearing for the budget.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. All right, we are now in a public hearing. Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Anything from the board? Okay. I make a motion, we now exit the public hearing for the budget.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. We are now out of the public hearing for the proposed budget. Next is public hearing for the medical marijuana ordinance. Again, anyone can speak, but there's a 4-minute time limit for each person. If you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. Make a motion that we enter public hearing for medical marijuana ordinance.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, we are now in the public hearing for the medical marijuana ordinance. Is there anybody who wishes to speak?
Well, thank you very much. I'm Joe Lukashevich. I'm actually from Greenbush Township, so I hope I'm still welcome here today. But I came to speak just briefly on the medical marijuana ordinance that you're proposing here. And first off, I want to thank you for being prescient and forward-thinking in pursuing an ordinance to deal with the medical marijuana issue here in Northeast Michigan. And I encourage you, if it does come up for a vote today, I encourage you to vote in the affirmative for it. So, again, I appreciate it because what you're doing here impacts not just Oscoda, Iosco County, but all of Northeast Michigan. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak?
My name is Deborah Dexel from East Holland, but I go to Oscoda, so I get to flip both ways. I want to share some information with you, and this is taken from the statistics fiscal year ending 2016 from michigan.gov/documents/LARA. For our surrounding counties, that would include Alpena, Aramac, Blackham, Iosco, Ogama, and Oscoda counties. There are 3,613 people under the medical marijuana program. Only people with debilitating conditions can qualify to be under this program. As of right now, 79.99% are categorized under severe and chronic pain. These numbers are growing every year. The problem we have is that we don't have any access medication in a safe environment. The closest dispensary that deals with this, that has a safe environment and has quality medication, is at Salander. That's a 10.5-hour drive for me. I've yet to do it in much time. I'm lame for days afterwards. It's a long, arduous drive, and there isn't anything closer unless we go to Flint, but then you don't have a safe environment. What you have is a very rough environment, and you take your life every time you go there. So, what I'm hoping, by informing you of what we're dealing with, those that do not have the ability to make that long drive, they're forced to turn to backyard growers. These people are registered and licensed through the state of Michigan to grow marijuana for their clients, but nobody has a clue as to what's in the product. And that's the thing that we fight dearly. We take medication for granted in this day and age because you can go to the pharmacy, you can get what you want. The only things that really help for my condition and for many of us under this program are narcotics and opioids, and we're done with it. I can't take them anymore. It landed me in the hospital for 2.5 weeks undergoing emergency surgery. For me, cannabis works. It's not harmful on the body, and I ask that the people that are having problems with the stigma associated to cannabis to please, please, please educate yourself, because many of us are hurting, we're in pain every day, and we don't want to turn to the narcotics. We're a Christian community. Jesus tells us to love one another, to help one another. He showed us how to love one another in his actions while he walked this earth. Never once did he refuse somebody that was hurting, that was in pain, that was poor, that needed help. And we are turning to you, our community, and we are asking you to help us, because the opioids are killing us, and there aren't drugs that help my condition unless you're going to the real powerful one. But cannabis works, and the different variants of cannabis that I can only get at a dispensary, that I can't get from a backyard grower, and that I don't want to get from a backyard grower. So when the community is turned to, and we are asking you for help, I am really hoping you do not turn a deaf ear because it's a stigma that you don't want to deal with. We are turning to you for help, and we are asking you, our Christian community, to help us. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak?
We have one card here from a gentleman who I believe would like to speak.
That his card?
Excuse me? Yes.
My name is Ken Vinstra. I live at 6696 Pine Avenue, just up the road a piece. I don't have a long or detailed comments. That probably won't take anywhere near 4 minutes. But I'm opposed to the ordinance. I've thought and tried to really come up with positive reasons. I couldn't come up with any. We just heard some that would be arguments for, but we're not the only place on this side of the state. Tawas, East Tawas, Hale, Glenny, Alpena, any of these places in the state could approve this. I just don't see an argument for having it here in Oscoda. I just don't see a positive benefit. If it's a distribution problem, then we should be getting together, because I'm not necessarily opposed to the medical marijuana, but I just don't see why our community needs to be a center for it. If there's distribution problems, then the people that are in need of this should bind together, and I would be supportive of other ways of distribution. Whether it's, I don't know what they would be, but I'm sure their distribution has been solved for all the other drugs, so there isn't any reason distribution couldn't be handled here, if none of the other municipalities around here would do it. But why Oscoda? I just don't think it's going to benefit our community. I can't think of a positive reason. Maybe we put it in our real estate ads. Oscoda, the Center for Marijuana Distribution. I'm just not sure. I'm not trying to make light of it, but I just am very opposed, and I don't see any reason for having it here in our community. We should be thinking of a lot of other positive things for Oscoda, not spending the amount of time we're spending here to do the medical marijuana.
Anybody else wish to speak? Anybody from the board? All right. I'll make a motion, we come out of public hearing for medical marijuana.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes. We are now out of the public hearing for medical marijuana. Next is our public comment period. This one, to speak at, you have to fill out a card, and there's a 4-minute time limit. Do we have any cards?
We do not.
All right, the floor is now closed to public comments. Next, consent agenda. Anybody have anything regarding the minutes for the work session of November 10th, the regular board meeting of November 13th, and the closed session for November 13th? Anybody have any comments regarding payment of bills for $211,953.92?
I had one comment I'd like to make. It's not a question, it is more of a comment on one item. The bills that were paid is a bill to Spicer Engineering for engineering fees for our wastewater assessment management plan. That's the amount of $100,194.55. The reason I wanted to mention this, we're going to be talking later on the agenda about some sewer issues. Just to make the audience aware, having a sewage treatment facility is an expensive proposition. It's expensive to build, it's expensive to maintain, and it's an ongoing process. Fortunately, we do get some grant money for some of these things. This particular item is covered under our SAW grant. But I just thought it important to stress to the community and the viewers and our audience that we spend a lot of money to maintain this sewer system, and there are some problems with it not being used properly, and I think that needs to be addressed, and I hope we can talk about that later in the agenda when we come to some of the other items that we have. So just wanted to point that out. It's almost half of the total amount of money we're spending, authorizing to spend here tonight, so thank you.
Any other comments regarding payment of bills?
I have a question regarding the minutes, small and trivial. The meetings that are held on Friday mornings before a meeting like tonight, how do you title those meetings? What are they called?
For purposes of the minutes, I have it as a work session. I think, I don't know what the agenda calls out, but common term is pre-board meeting work session. But that may not be a formal term.
Yeah. I guess what I'm getting at is I really don't personally like to ever skip work sessions if possible. And I noticed that here they're referred to as a work session, and I'm an absentee, which I usually am on those Friday pre-meetings or whatever, but if you can come up with some other name than work session, because you see what I'm going, I really didn't skip a work session, so,
No, I agree, because when we first set that up, we said it was optional, so.
yeah.
Right.
Well, they're all, in a way,
Well-
optional, but I thought it was called a pre-meeting or I don't know. But anyway, that's just an opinion. If it can't be done, I can live with it, but you see what I'm saying. I really don't. I feel attending work sessions is an obligation that I have being a trustee here, and I don't want it to be recorded 10 years from now that buyer skips work sessions all the time. I don't. But, okay. That's all.
On that, I don't know, I think that's a decision for the board to make. I don't maybe feel comfortable creating a new title by myself.
Okay.
So, for what it's worth, if we're gonna go down that avenue, I'd like to do it as a board.
Okay.
I think that's, if that's fair to everybody. Food for thought.
Sure, we could set up a subcommittee called Naming a Meeting.
Please don't.
All right,
I just don't want that burden on my shoulders, is all I know.
all right, then on to reports, wastewater lagoon Phragmites treatment. Any comments regarding that?
Is President's now about these Phragmites, or they're now?
They, yeah, I assume they still are. They were treated and for them to.
They were there when we rebuilt this?
They were there, they were removed, and they've regrown.
We've grown already,
Yeah.
less than a year.
So we overhaul lagoons and Phragmites are there that fast? Wow.
Wow.
They are pervasive.
Do we have anything now in plans to treat this on a yearly basis?
I presume that's what we'll be doing, to try and keep them under control.
That means yes?
Do they grow faster than they do down on the shoreline of Lake Huron or something? No? Boy, I thought they would.
The Phragmites on the Lake Huron shoreline, we previously did this agreement, were those treated this year?
They were.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve it?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Gajewski, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, subcommittee report and project updates. First I have on here is potential creation of environmental contamination remediation subcommittee.
Yes, there was discussion recently, there is a working group involving marketing and essentially interfacing with our environmental consultant. And one of the ideas that was kicked around within that session was that it might be of benefit for the board to create a bona fide environmental consulting subcommittee, essentially formalize one to interact with the consultant and also talk about the myriad of issues and concerns we now have relative to environmental remediation and contamination. So that concept has been brought forward for the board's consideration as a result of that discussion.
So we're just gonna ponder this until we have it under another part of the agenda, right?
We can do that, or we can put it on a future agenda if folks would like to take some time to think about it.
What's the board think?
I think it's a good idea. We entered into contract with AKT Peerless, and that has sort of turned into a marketing plan right now, but I think this, I'd be happy to work on that committee to move it on more on the environmental impact side of the equation with AKT.
What type of things would they be doing that they can't address the whole board with, I guess? I mean, you still are gonna have to try to get 3 of the 7 people together, and I think it's gonna be happening that fast that the board can't be made aware, kept up to date on through emails or things like that we're already doing.
Well, I think that's part of the value judgment that needs to be made. I certainly don't want to speak for the folks who sort of conceptualize the idea, but my belief is that they thought we might be able to respond more quickly between meetings and that kind of thing to various demands and essentially provide direction to the consultant more consistently and that kind of thing.
I didn't think subcommittees could do that.
They could if they were empowered.
Okay.
Any other comments? Thoughts? Insights?
I guess I'm generally in favor of the idea. I guess I'm kind of feeling like I want to know a little bit more about it, what they intend they want to do, I guess. Or I guess I would maybe following where Ms. McGuire is going is being concerned about somehow forming a subcommittee where then the board gets the sense that they're losing control of something or another. I'm not sure what that would be, but I'm just think that's why I think that's where she was going, and that occurred to me as well as I heard you speak.
So I'm at a little disadvantage here because I thought what we were going to do is introduce it and kick it around and not get into the details, frankly. So there's been a little bit of a disconnect
Okay, fair enough.
with our group. So my thought is that maybe we should refer this back to that group and then come back with something maybe a little bit more defined at this point.
I would like that.
Being part of the group, I feel a little bad being playing silent on you guys, but I don't really know what to offer. I don't know what you're looking for, so there is a bit of a disconnect, I think. One thing I'd mention is that it has been difficult to get the 3 or 4 of us together just with the consultant. So whether that
Right.
speaks to maybe why not just go for the whole thing and get the whole board together, or not, but
I see the benefit as the subcommittee could go over several of the details of such as the marketing plan, develop something, and then bring it to the board without having to go over a bunch of details like that with the board as a whole every meeting. The subcommittee can go ahead and plan that out, like the other subcommittees have done with other things. So for instance, on the marketing plan, there needs to be a whole development thing going on there that deals with the website, that deals with the reaching out on social media, with who we're going to have do this, how we're going to have it done. So we can sit here every Monday evening that we have a regular board meeting and discuss those things, or we can have the subcommittee just take care of it. In addition to that, if something comes up, such as a letter like we received today from the Air Force, subcommittee might be able to deal with that on a more responsive basis rather than waiting a few weeks for the regular meeting.
And yet, I think that's an example of where I think everybody on the board would want to be involved in that conversation, because that particular item, I think I think every one of us has an opinion about it. I'm just speaking for myself, but I am opening it up to a generality. But I get your point. I guess that's where I'm trying to figure out, where is the line drawn and what is it? That's where I was trying to get some information. But in concept, I like the idea of subcommittees. I mean, that's why we formed them. But I just wasn't sure what the specific charter of this one was.
And if it's a thing of having a subcommittee just for the marketing aspect of it, remediation, a
Yeah.
different subject, then that's fine. But I think there's a benefit to having the subcommittee for it,
Okay,
for at least the marketing part of it.
fair enough.
I can see both points for, like, having the subcommittee. I get it, because people want to be more involved and have things to contribute. I think it's a fine line that you get when you start letting the subcommittee make decisions or do things and speaking for the whole board, like Tim was saying. I think we're getting to the point where subcommittee to death, if you ask me. I mean, talk about, and I know there's a lot of different aspects to it with the contamination, but you've got the RAB, you've got the community group that's trying to get information out there, you got DHS that has the public meetings, you have the couple people that are working with the consultants. I mean, at some point, you're missing I feel like I'm missing information because other people are just dealing with it, and you're not getting updated, or you're not getting this, or it's not coming back to us as a board. And to me, part of it is that when you have those different things, then you are kind of tying the hands of people that are supposed to be dealing with it. It makes it harder for them to do their job too when they're dealing with 15 different subcommittees trying to gather information and get their thing to the entire board too. So I just think it's getting to be a slippery slope if you ask me, but that's all.
Any other comments? All right, next thing I got is the Air Force response to the alternate Gackt locations. We just received a letter today from the Air Force saying that they,
Would you like to just read it for the folks in the audience? Good, since it is short.
says, thank you for your letter of 14 November 2017, which proposes a no-cost lease for any of the locations of B, C, and D. Unfortunately, the Air Force lacks legal authority to accept ownership of lease of stormwater system infrastructure if other users of such infrastructure do so without like ownership or lease obligations. If the Township and Airport Authority eliminate this requirement, we will focus on locations B, C, and D for the site of the Gackt treatment plant. Otherwise, the Air Force will direct its attention to parcels 23 and 26 or adjacent parcels. I take this to mean that they because it's not addressed in here for doing groundwater injection for sites B, C, or D, they only focused on the storm sewer, that they pretty much just decided we're just gonna go with parcels 23 and 26 regardless of any of the talks that we've had. I went ahead and sent this off to Dan Kildee and to the governor's office and the DEQ to ask them what their involvement is with this, especially since this letter wasn't copied to anybody in the DEQ, and the DEQ is the one who has to issue the permits of whether they can put it on that site and discharge on that site.
Isn't Bob Delaney
Yeah,
a member of the DEQ?
he's last on the list.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, but we'll see where that goes. Anyways, the deputy director of the DEQ is now aware of this, of that. So, and we've heard nothing from the DEQ as to
Right.
what they're okay with and what they're not okay with. They've already expressed they prefer stormwater discharge instead of groundwater injection, but this right here says the Air Force pretty much just wants to do groundwater injection. But yet, they've also said that it's too expensive to do groundwater injection, so they would rather go into storm sewer, so I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah. Join the club.
Well, I kind of interpreted the letter a little differently. I thought it sounded like they would consider B, C, or D if we didn't have the restriction on the leasing the stormwater system. And I can understand from a legal perspective that if we're not charging other users of that system, that we probably wouldn't have legal authority to charge them for that same system. So I guess I can kind of see, even though that's not really what we wanted to have happen. I didn't see any response in there concerning the other issue that we'd requested, and that is taking down and dismantling these facilities at the end of the period. So I'm a little lost as to where they stand on that part of the discussion that we had. But I think for purpose of expediting this along, I guess based on the legal problems with the stormwater sewer, I would be in favor of reissuing our letter saying we're open to parcels B, C, and D with no fee and use of the stormwater sewer system.
We don't have anybody else that uses that volume of water though, do we?
Right, that's what I was thinking.
That's why.
Nobody discharges
Yeah.
processed water. in
Right, they're the
storm
only
sewer.
ones, that's why.
It's not stormwater, I mean, it's a different use
Right.
for the system
Yeah.
than what's intended, but I can see the legal argument that if the system is there and we're not charging anybody else for using it, then, you know.
How could we?
That's not a
But
legal
there is
But there isn't nobody else.
Yeah.
And so all we gotta do is put an ordinance in saying that is what we
That they're
do.
going to pay.
And we told the
If-
Air Force that before.
But my understanding is if they do that, then they can just go ahead automatically and use the other parts, the A zone that we really didn't want to have the facilities built on, because they own that property or have access to it, unrestricted access.
Potentially.
But they still didn't address groundwater injection at those
No.
other sites.
No.
Yep.
So
That's
this-
what tells me that they were more focused on just doing these meetings as a cover than,
And doing what they want.
than was actually taking us seriously.
True. True.
Agreed.
Bob, in your past history of dealing with the Air Force, because we've been doing it since the base closed in '93, and trying to get parcels conveyed to the township or to our OED office at the time, is this something that you see all the time? It's part of the bantering back and forth until you come to some type of agreement? I mean, is this way out of what usually happens?
The back and forth is not unusual. I guess my impression is the Air Force with this issue is taking a little harder line than they have in the past. My thought is if there are specific considerations that the board thinks are important in responding here, such as the point that Bill just raised relative to demolishing and so forth, we might consider telling them we're going to respond in 2 weeks at our next meeting, because we just got this today. And I don't think it's a reasonable expectation that we can turn it around on 6 hours' notice or whatever the number is without due deliberation on behalf of the community. Specifically, or particularly if there are issues or concerns that we don't have answers that are relevant for at this point.
Mr. Supervisor, a couple of years ago, roughly, when this all started, bad stuff in the ground, PFAS, and I think it was the very first meeting at the Methodist Church downtown, and Senator Jim Thomas was there, and he asked if there's a state law that forbids you to put such and such in the ground, and there are penalties in that state law, would you abide by them? And they said yes. And he said, well, I'm out of here. And he walked out like, I'm going to make this law tonight. You know, he exited the meeting. And he was gone, and I asked the Air Force people, and at least one of the Air Force people is one of these, the top guy in the copied letter, Mr. Termath, Dr. Termath. But they had a little team, and I asked them, I said, you really are going to obey the laws of Michigan? What if every state makes a different law about PFAS and the like? You got 50 laws. You're going to obey all of them? Yep. Well, at that time I sat on the Air Force board too, and the very next morning, just by coincidence, there was the same Air Force team made their little presentation before the Air Force board.
Airport board?
Airport board, thank you, thank you. The Air Force at the airport board. But they had their lawyer with them in the second phase. She was not there the previous night. And I brought it up again as a member of the airport board. And she said, I don't care what kind of law, these are my words, but it's close. I don't care what kind of law they make, but it better apply to everybody. You know, not just things that the Air Force puts in the ground, but if Dow Chemical has a plant up here or somebody else. And that's kind of what I expected their stand was going to be. And it makes a little sense. It grieves me to kind of back the Air Force in their reasoning, but I think they're doing the same thing here, you know. Now, you've very clearly said that there are no other people availing themselves of the stormwater system, but there could be in the future. But like you said, there's a quick fix for that. But they use that logic quite a bit. Don't pick on us as individuals. If you're going to make rules, they got to apply to everybody that can do bad things to the environment, not just the United States Air Force. So it's not the first time they've done that. So
No, but we should have an ordinance in place for that anyways.
Yes.
Whether the Air Force was here or not.
Agreed.
But they really changed their tune between Wednesday evening and Thursday morning.
Yep.
So we just, people want to wait until the next meeting to address this? So I'd like to get information from the DEQ.
Yeah.
Next, we had the teleconference between the governor and the DEQ that we have monthly. They talked about the new task force that was set up regarding PFAS contamination around the state, which their initial talks were to begin right after our phone conversation. We made them aware of several of our issues in detail, especially regarding the surface water issues with Van Etten Lake, Van Etten Creek, and Oscoda River. So they were gonna go over all those and address that in a few weeks for our December meeting. Does anybody have anything else? All right, then on superintendent report, first is professional services contract agreement for the engineer.
Thank you. The board had authorized pursuing a contract agreement with Rowe Professional Services Company, and we put together a document which is consistent with our standard form for professional services agreements, which basically provides for an initial 2-year term with a potential for an additional 2-year renewal. I note in this case that Rowe had agreed to freeze the hourly fee schedule for the initial 2-year term, which was part of what we discussed during the engagement process in terms of bringing the company on board and making them our service provider. So they have signed the contract agreement, and it is being presented this evening for potential approval through execution by the supervisor and clerk. I note also that a principal with the company is here this evening, Mr. Rick Freeman. Thank him for venturing north this evening. He wanted to introduce himself to the board, and we'll take the opportunity while the contract's being discussed. Assuming the affirmative in terms of moving forward and authorizing the contract. They also have indicated, they being Rowe, that they would like to make a return visit, talk with key staff persons involved in the engineering procurement process for the township, look at various facilities, essentially familiarize themselves with our needs, and for that, we would be appreciative. I think that would be a helpful step moving forward. So with that, the first order of business would be the contract and then the introduction and any comments Mr. Freeman might have.
Any comments?
When we last discussed this, engineering services, there was talk of cost sharing concept. Did that materialize? Is that reflected in the contract?
That is not reflected in the contract. That would be reflected in whatever arrangements we have for specific projects.
It'd be arrangement by
presumably.
arrangement basis, not a contractual basis. Okay.
It would be a contract basis, but it wouldn't be the master agreement basis.
Okay.
There. That's the way to put that.
I guess that's the underlying assumption. Certainly, if we wanted to try and work something into the contract agreement, the master agreement, the retainer agreement, we could do that, but that would be, I think, more difficult than dealing with specific projects.
Okay. I just don't want to see it go by the wayside, is all.
Well, it seems to me that in our interviews, they were the only company that was willing to entertain that possibility, if I remember, memory serves.
Specifically.
That's what was mentioned at the last meeting. That was what it was billed as, so just make sure we're moving forward as advertised.
This contract doesn't state anything about the level of due diligence. Was there any plan for that?
I am not certain exactly what reference you're making there, so.
As far as the due diligence for cost estimations, for unknowns that are encountered except for hard rock? Also regarding project cost overages, it would kind of go in line with the due diligence part of it.
Well, I guess I would interpret that as going back to Mr. Nordin's comment, and if that's our desire to have some generalized statement there, then we certainly can address it. Because I think that goes to the shared risk and so forth to some extent. So,
Any other comments? Would you like to speak?
Rick Freeman with Rowe Professional Services Company, and just like to take this opportunity to thank the township for considering us and for this opportunity, and we look forward to working with you. And the due diligence is built into our normal everyday business approach, and also the risk and the cost sharing is like as we discussed at our interview process and all that stuff. We've been more than willing to enter into those arrangements as get specifically to the projects that come up. So again, very common practice that we do with most of our, if not all of our contracts of this type of nature. So with that, I can answer any other questions that you might like.
How far did you have to travel to be with us tonight?
Actually, I have a cabin just north of Au Gres. So,
You didn't have to tell us that.
But no, I'm basically out of our corporate office in Flint. But both of our surveying and our construction group will be working out of our Grayling, Michigan office.
Okay.
But I will use the cabin considerably as far as whatever I can. So, but I will
Is
be
it
your
available to board members also?
sure. And when the walleye are biting, we can go. So, but I will be your point of contact, and I have the ability to enter into any agreement, whatever is necessary with the company and the township, and work with you and your staff at as Mr. Stalker said, that we would gladly come up here, get ourselves introduced. Mm-hmm. And again, no cost to the township to get ourselves up to speed and familiarized with the projects that are out there.
So, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments?
That's good.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we authorize the supervisor and clerk to execute the contract with Rowe.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordin, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, drop-off refuse contract renewal.
yes, our contract agreement with Sunrise Disposal for our drop-off program expires at the end of the year. We had talked during the budgeting process of not only maintaining the program, but sticking with the 2 events per year process. So the budget assumes that we will do that. That then raises a question as to whether there would be a preference for seeking bids for the service now that the contract is going to expire, or entering into negotiation or discussion with Sunrise regarding establishing a new contract agreement. For purposes of perspective, when we last bid the service in 2014, we received one proposal. We have gotten generally positive feedback regarding the experiences with the current vendor. Not that we can't bid it, but it may be relevant that we had limited interest last time. So looking for feedback as to, again, whether you would like to put together, have us put together an RFP or talk to the current vendor.
Any comments?
I think we should just move forward with starting to talk with Sunrise.
Last time it was bid out, how many events were requested in the bid?
I believe one.
It was one, so that's changed now.
Yes.
We've had problems in the past with one company charging a lot. Another one would not comply with requirements in the contract. Sunrise has been the only one we've dealt with so far that has actually complied and provided very good service.
Yeah, I'm unaware of any particular issues. You said generally good feedback, but I'm not aware of any bad feedback.
There is none specifically that comes to mind, but that doesn't mean it didn't occur.
Fair enough,
Yeah.
that's right. But nothing that's been presented to us.
I think I'd rather bid it, because that way we at least have the option of continuing on with Sunrise. If we have a bad history with anyone who bids, we can still make that decision, but things have changed since the last time. It's actually, the events have doubled. I mean, I feel like 1 to 2, but I think that changes the parameters enough to warrant a rebid.
I thought we had some in the past where we did 2.
We did just have to.
We preserve the
No.
option to
Oh.
A few years prior to that, we had somebody that did 2, but they still would not comply with the contract.
Right, we had some insurance issues, as I recall. I think we preserved the option to add them, but the basic bid was for one, is my recollection.
Any other comments?
I'm just kind of feeling like, I understand Mr. Nardine's point. I mean, it's nice to bid certain types of work out, but this seems to be a good vendor renewal scenario. I don't know, I don't feel like I need to spend more time on it. That's just my thought.
I'd have to agree. I mean, usually you would, but I just think that it's kind of takes up too much time, and we've had good success and not a good turnout with the bids, and why do all that work? We got other things to do. Or staff does, I should say.
Yeah.
Seems like every time we try to rebid something, it always comes back and bites us anyhow. I'd rather try to negotiate something.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be interested in to see what the negotiation with them would be for the updated services. Like I said, their service has been good in the past. I actually took some stuff out at one of the opportunities this past year, and it was unbelievable. You pull in and they're right there to unload everything for you, and I mean, 10 minutes I was out of there. I think they do a real good job. It seems to be a reasonable price. Now my question would be, if we're doubling that, would it only entail doubling the price that we had in the past? Now if it's more than that for some reason, then I would say maybe we need to reconsider. And to Mr. Nordine's point, since we're not planning this, our first event would be in June, I believe it is. We had it. We've certainly got plenty of time if we wanted to put a bid out for it. But based on, past experience, if you're only going to get one bid anyway, and they've done a good job, I don't know. I guess I would be in favor of negotiating with them and talking to them, and then bringing back to the board to see what they come up with as a proposal, and then we could always opt to not accept that and put it out for bid.
I think this is a good service. It keeps garbage from piling up in places we don't want it. I've used it myself quite a bit, but from personal experience and things I've seen, this takes a huge chunk out of the business that most people would be normally taking to the junkyard. Whoever gets this corners it almost, and so just that's feeding into why I think we should at least open it up, and then we can say, hey, we give everyone a fair shot at all this business. Because you can't beat the deal that we provide here to drop off what we allow them to drop off at the cost. So that's just where I'm coming from.
So what's consensus? Go out for bids, renegotiate?
I make the motion that we renegotiate with Sunrise for the drop-off service contract.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Gajewski, support by Mr. Cummings.
Bob, would we talk about the fee schedule for that now or establish that later?
Either or, certainly there's no limitation on
Okay.
when we might want to bring that up.
Any comments on the motion? Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Christmas Eve holiday schedule.
Yes, questions have emerged from employees recently regarding how we're going to schedule the holiday period in 2017. Specifically, the labor contract falls for holidays that fall on Sunday being recognized on Monday, and I provided the excerpt from the labor contract that governs there. In the current year, that's not going to work because Monday is Christmas Day. So the employees would have that off anyway. We had a similar situation in 2006, and the approach that was taken at that point was that we recognized Tuesday, the 26th, as Christmas Eve for purposes of scheduling the holiday. That allows employees looking for an extended break a better opportunity because you've got more days off between the holidays. Also, our experience has been there's a lot of businesses that are closed in that time frame, and there's probably less productivity loss than going in the other direction, if you will. I spoke with our bargaining unit representatives regarding that approach, and they are amenable to it. So I'm seeking approval from the board to recognize December 26th as Christmas Eve in 2017 for purposes of the holiday off.
Comments?
I was just curious, was there any discussion given to having Friday as the holiday?
There wasn't. There wasn't.
Okay. Just
So this happens once every 16th year?
Yeah. To go back to Mr. Palmer's question, we certainly could consider that, but the thought was, again, moving it between the holidays should give people
right.
the ability to, yeah.
Right. Yeah. That would actually make it an eve as opposed to a post.
Right.
True.
Any other comments?
With the contract, is there any way, like, next time that it's time to come around to negotiate that maybe we can get clarification on some of the holidays a little bit better? Because it seems kind of gray.
We certainly could. And then that was one point that came up during discussion with the group. This hasn't really been a matter of contention, it's just a process we could avoid
That we
having
go
to
through
deal
every year,
with.
yeah. Just a thought.
Is there a motion?
I'll move to recognize Tuesday, December 26, 2017 as the Christmas Eve holiday.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, sale of used John Deere backhoe.
Yes, board members may recall that we had approved the purchase of a new John Deere backhoe earlier this year. That machine is now in service. That raises a question as to whether we have a surplus of backhoes in our inventory, and the answer from staff standpoint is yes. Specifically, there are two older backhoes, a 94 310D and a 96 310D, both John Deere's. And again, from a staff standpoint, we believe both merit being disposed of, and the question is, if the board were amenable to disposing of one, which should we retain that would have most benefit for the township? In my report, I had indicated the 94 model had a parking brake issue. It's actually the 96 model, I'm told today. The 94 model then is the one with the reverser gear issue. So both of them have issues. The suggestion, based on discussion earlier today, is that we should keep the 1996 model and repair the parking brake, which is just under $4,000. Further, the suggestion is we then sell the 1994 model with the reverser gear being inoperable. Back in 2014, a similar repair was made, and it cost $3,654. So that gives you some idea where we would be today. I had originally suggested that if we look at a minimum bid of $15,000, that might be on the high side, given the new information we have. We might consider going down to $14,000 or $13,000. On the other hand, there's no harm in setting a minimum bid that's too high and adjusting after the fact. So, again, the thought would be to keep the 96 model, sell the 94 model as is.
Comments?
We have one out Old Orchard too, right?
That is one of the two, I
This
believe.
is one of the two,
Yeah, yeah.
so we have three.
No,
We have three now, yes.
a total three, yeah.
Dumb question, but reverser gear means it cannot go in reverse, or what?
That is my understanding, yes.
Whoa. That's a biggie.
Yes.
Okay.
We sell these as is. We don't make any warranties or guarantees on anything we sell like this, right?
Right, we would disclose the issue and try and price it accordingly.
I was looking at the examples that you had listed in here, and quite frankly, I thought your 15,000 was a little low, based on the prices that were listed in there. There's a 92 at $20,000, two 95s, one at 19 and one at 26, and a 94 at 20,000.
Were there maintenance issues with the other ones?
Didn't list any in there. I don't. It's hard to tell.
So that's where you would compensate that?
Yeah. But I mean,
Makes
if,
sense.
you know, you got these selling at 20,000, if we have a $3,000 issue, I would think 17,000 would be, or higher, would be a better starting point. I mean, at that, we'd still be lower than any of these other four that were listed in that review you had.
I am of the understanding, and I'm not certain what the hours are on some of these, both of our machines have an excess of 5,000 hours, and that has an impact on value also.
Okay.
Would it benefit us to sell this in the spring when there's a higher demand?
I'm not certain, that's a question maybe we would want to ask our John Deere representative. My initial reaction is if we set a price that we thought was reasonable and we got that price, so be it. If we didn't, we could hold off.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
We're gonna sell the one with the reverser gear problem. You gonna be upfront with that is when you list it?
We are, yes.
Because that's not even safe. You know, I mean, if it's digging a hole and it starts to cave in and there's guys down there and they want to back this thing out of the way before it goes in the hole too, can't do it.
Right. No, I think it probably means it's not practical for use, so, yeah, in general.
But based on what you said, that's a cheaper fix than the parking brake.
Very similar within.
Pretty close to
yeah,
the same
yeah,
amount.
very, very similar.
Yeah.
Depending on how much the cost have escalated over the last 3 years to do the repair.
Right.
So this 94 is the one that the reverse gear went out before on, Bob?
Yes.
I make a motion that we dispose of the John Deere 310D backhoe as deemed appropriate by staff at an auction sale starting bid of $15,000.
Support.
1994?
Whichever one they decide is appropriate to sell. Is that you that supported it?
Yep.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. Motion passed. Next, sanitary sewer infiltration issue.
Yes, an issue came to light last week regarding a significant amount of infiltration going into the sanitary sewer system on the south end of our downtown area. The Dwight Street lift station has apparently been running almost nonstop, prompting investigation as to the cause of the infiltration. Initially, there was some suspicion that our inspectors through the SAW program had found a few breaches in the sewer main that they thought might have been the cause, but we are thinking now it is coming from one of our customers, without getting into details, outside the township system. It obviously feeds the township system, but that hasn't been confirmed. So there's going to be some televising work done, I'm told tomorrow we'll know more. My thought, if the board were amenable to it, is that myself, in conjunction with the supervisor, be allowed some latitude from a financial standpoint to deal with the issue once we determine what it is, because with that lift station running, it appears to be something that should be addressed sooner rather than later. If it appears to be a major problem, then we may have to have a special meeting. And I don't know, the board had previously, in conjunction with our construction projects, said $5,000 was a reasonable limit for unforeseen issues. Maybe that's a reasonable level to deal with this at. But in any event, we have a significant issue of unknown origin that's going to need to be addressed here. Maybe from the township standpoint. It's possible, again, that it's just feeding our system from outside the township infrastructure. If that's the case, then it presumably will be dealt with the responsible parties.
Catherine, do you have any input?
Yes, the thought would be that if, in fact, that is the source, an outside party, that until repair can be made by them, that the sewer could potentially be blocked off from them. I guess the source sewer has very few users, and we could make arrangements for that to be handled another way in a short period of time until a repair could be effected, depending on what the outcome is of the televising tomorrow. So, the cost that Mr. Stalker has proposed possibly could allow us to have the sewer plugged off so that we can relieve that lift station from running continually. We have some previous televising of the sewer in that area, and it's basically surcharged. We haven't had any sewer backups or any issues because of that, but because that lift station is running continually at a high level, we have concerns that in the event that a pump were to fail or something else were to happen, that could be a possible outcome. So we'd like to have it addressed, in a more timely fashion.
Okay.
Any comments?
For the benefit of the audience, Catherine is the official that represents Fleece and Vandenbrink that the company that handles our water and sewer facilities. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, it's kind of a side note to this. I think it would seem to me to be appropriate to consider taking a look at our sewer ordinance. I think that needs to be revised. I don't think that's been done in a number of years. And as I mentioned before, in my earlier statement about the $100,000 that we're spending on this inspection of our system, the system is an expensive system not only to put in but to operate, and we need to have something in place that has guidelines in terms of misuse by customers. And without that, we end up looking at some substantial costs. And so I think it would be appropriate. And now we have an in-house engineering firm that I think could probably handle writing this ordinance with us and getting that up to date. I think that would be an appropriate step to take sooner rather than later.
I agree.
Catherine, is this the one on the corner of Lake Street and Dwight?
Yes.
It's the one with the little green light that's on all the time, right? I don't know how many people have asked me about that.
Anything else?
So the idea is that $5,000 would be enough, or we think it could be more. Maybe what we're looking for from the board is something in the order of magnitude of maybe $10,000? Okay. All right, thanks for the hint. All right, well then, I'd make a motion here to provide the authority to the supervisor and superintendent to exercise emergency repairs up to $10,000.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, fire hydrant condition assessment.
Yes, questions have come up at recent budgetary work sessions regarding the condition of fire hydrants in the municipal water system, particularly those in the Wordsmith district. Based on those discussions, I had asked our contract operator to prioritize doing an assessment of the hydrant conditions, and was hopeful that information would be available to guide decision-making going into the new fiscal year. In response to that request, our regional operations manager had put together a communication which is included in the board packet, and obviously everyone is aware now that Ms. Garnham is in attendance to answer questions regarding the subject in general and the memorandum in particular.
Comments? All right, on to resolutions and ordinances. First one is Resolution 2017-22 for adopting medical marijuana ordinance number 2017-260. First, we have to start off with our second reading.
Yes. Okay, this is ordinance 217-260. An ordinance to authorize and regulate the establishment of medical marijuana facilities. Section 1 is purpose and intent. Section 2 is definitions. Section 3 is authorization and location of facilities. Section 4 is general standards, uses, and restrictions. Section 5 is requirements and procedure for issuing permits. Section 6 is permit renewal. Section 7 is applicability. Section 8 is penalties and enforcement. Section 9 is severability. And Section 10 is the effective date.
All right. Any comments from the board? Is there a motion?
I move to adopt resolution 2017-22 to authorize and regulate medical marijuana facilities.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Any comments on the motion?
I have a little story to go along with this a little bit that just occurred yesterday. My wife has spent some time in Bronson Hospital in Kalamazoo, and yesterday, Sunday afternoon, we were talking with a couple nurses because she has a procedure that takes about 4 hours that needed to be done today. And I said, is there any way that she can have this done early in the morning? Because I have 2 daughters that can pick her up in the morning, but later in the day. And they looked at me and like, what about you? And I said, I have to be up north tomorrow. And they asked, what's the big deal? Why do you have to be up north? I said, and I told her what we are going to be doing tonight. And one of the nurses pressed further and said, what's your stance on this? I said, I'm in favor of it, but it's a close vote. You're in favor. Go up north, we will take care of this procedure in the morning. You know, and they settled it right there. Both of them said, get in your car, go. So, but to provide a little balance, I have a son-in-law that is a medical doctor, and he is not real enthused about this. So I'm getting it both ways. So.
Any other comments on the motion? Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
No.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
No.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2017-23, establishing fees for medical marijuana licensing.
This is obviously a related resolution. It would establish the fees for licensing for the township based upon the allowed maximum charges as determined by the Michigan Facilities Licensing Act, which is currently $5,000 per facility.
Any comments?
What's the minimum?
Do not know the answer to that question. I suspect that is discretionary.
Yeah, there is no minimum.
Well, I thought it meets certain criteria, and so that's why it's a maximum of $5,000. Not necessarily you're going to get $5,000.
Well, if we charge $5,000, we'll get $5,000.
I thought that was established by the state, though, that they have to meet certain criteria, and that establishes the fee
No.
for the license.
That's for subsequent years, isn't it? Not for the
Right.
first year?
Right. State sets the maximum. And then we have to justify the cost after the first year.
Right.
Right.
Okay. But you're going to be able to justify it to the $5,000 each time is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to adopt resolution 2017-23 to establish fees for medical marijuana licensing.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Any comments on the motion? Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2017-24 for the fiscal year 2018 general appropriations.
Yes, if adopted, this resolution would approve the proposed fiscal year 2018 operating budgets. It incorporates the wages that are set forth in the compensation plan that's a part of that document, accepting the salaries and wages of elected officials, which are addressed by separate resolution in the board packet. The specific appropriations for each budgetary fund are identified in the resolution. There are responsibilities assigned to various parties, specifically primarily myself and our treasurer. And the budget is adopted by cost center and provides authority to make budgetary amendments for the superintendent within each cost center, with the exception of personnel and capital outlays. Typically, all budgetary amendments are brought before the board, but that prerogative is allowed by the resolution. So this would put into effect the budget for the upcoming year if approved, with the exception of the separate resolutions for elected officials' salaries.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we adopt resolution 2017-24.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2017-25 for Township Supervisor salary.
Yes, this is one of the resolutions I just made reference to. It would reflect a 2% increase, like the others, for elected officials on a year-to-year basis. The resulting salary would be $15,037.04.
Bob, just to be clear, the elected officials get the same increase as the rest of the employees, correct? There is
That
no
is
difference.
correct.
Yeah, okay.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve resolution 2017-25.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
No. Motion's passed. Next, resolution 2017-26, Township Clerk salary.
Essentially the same resolution, with the difference being the clerk's salary of $46,666.04.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
Move that we adopt the new 2018 salary for the clerk.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Gasky?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed?
No. Next, resolution 2017-27, Township Treasurer salary.
This is the same salary, actually, as township clerk, and again, based on a 2% increase.
Comments? Motion?
Move to adopt resolution 2017-27 to establish the township treasurer's salary at $46,666.04 for 2018.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gasky? Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
No. Next, resolution 2017-28, Township Trustee salary.
This would affect our 4 trustees and adjust the salary to $4,276.89, to be exact.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion that we approve the resolution 2017-28.
Support. Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
No. Next, Resolution 2017-29, fiscal year 2017 budget amendments.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to mention this will not be the entirety of our budget adjustments this year. There will be a slew of them coming at the next meeting. Having said that, these are the primary adjustments for the general fund. I note that the special assessment for weed control is down based on the actual amount collected for last year's program. It's also down on the expenditure side significantly. We budget based on a maximum, and then we spend what the actual requirements are, so that was way down this year, approaching $50,000 on a $70,000 budget. So the beginning fund balance was increased by necessity by $118,000, primarily to offset our local match for the property acquisition grant, which you might recall carried over into the current fiscal year from last year as originally budgeted. Building improvements were increased primarily to deal with our Township Hall roof need. We've also got $27,000 that is receipted for the Iron Bell grant that wasn't originally anticipated. There are obviously a number of other adjustments, but those are the primary ones. And in some, you've got a beginning balance increase of 118,000. Is that the number? Yes, 118,000, and a grant payout of 138,000. So basically, that's the primary impact.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve resolution 2000-17, or 2017-29.
I'll support it. Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, bad debt write-off.
Yes, this is communication from our utility billing clerk involving bad debt, which represents an overage above the deposit that we collect for rental properties of $44,000 or $44.30. It's uncollectible. There are more of these forthcoming, I'm told, which leads to the conclusion that we may want to consider increasing that deposit amount at some point in the future. But that is a different topic.
Comments?
Just a question. What is truth and agency water account mean? What is that truth and agency? It's a capitalized
It
series of
should be
words.
trust and agency. That's a typo.
Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Any other comments?
Do you need to know anything else about it? Okay.
This 44, is this ready to serve?
No, it's not. It's in excess above the deposit. So, well, it could be potentially part of it could be ready to serve, but it's a total on the bill due and owing above what the deposit amount was. So it could be a combination of consumption and ready to serve, probably.
Our deposit amount is $205 right now.
And you're suggesting we should raise that?
I think we should consider that, yes,
Okay.
to minimize our exposure in this regard.
Is that because of the, I'm sorry.
That's for another time to discuss.
Yeah, we were going to do a little bit of a survey and see what other communities are doing to.
Okay.
And is that because we didn't raise the deposit when we were raising our fees at the beginning of the year?
This is a little different situation. The deposit isn't tied directly to the fees. Conceptually, I guess you could certainly look at it that way, but
Yeah.
there's historically not been a direct linkage. I guess I would say now that we're starting to experience some of these issues, that's the red flag that, it requires attention potentially.
Right, I mean, well, I'm thinking if we raise our fees, then the deposit is eaten into that much faster, is what I'm thinking.
Correct.
That's where the exposure is measured. Okay, fair
Yes,
enough, okay,
that is a correct assumption.
fair enough.
Is there a motion?
I would move to write off the bad debt in the amount of $44.30.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, we have Planning Commission member appointments. That will be delayed until the next meeting while we work on validation of dates. Next, Zoning Board of Appeals member appointment. We have Mr. Greg Schultz has volunteered to be on the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Is that as a member or as an alternate?
However the board wants to work that out, but as far as I know, that's an alternate.
Alternate.
So there is no vacancy now? There is no vacancy?
On the ZBA, no.
Yeah, okay.
No, we have a vacancy, though, 2 vacancies on the,
Building authority.
Planning
I'm sorry, 1 vacancy on the Senior Center Building Authority. But we have 2 positions open on it. So if anybody wants to volunteer for the Senior Center Building Authority, then please let the township know and they will get a hold of me about that. But for now, we have George Schultz who's applied for the ZBA. I make a motion that we appoint George Schultz to the ZBA
Greg.
for a, I'm sorry, for an expiration of 2020.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer.
For clarification on the motion, Greg Schultz.
Not George.
George, you said.
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg Schultz.
Does he have to be appointed as the alternate? Or he does, doesn't he? Okay.
For board members that are not sure who he is, maybe he's relatively new to town, but he attends a lot of our meetings. He's kind of a slim guy with the white hair. He's been to many of our meetings. And he's a native of Oscoda, graduate of Oscoda High School. So,
Did you teach him?
yes. I was gonna keep that quiet.
Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next is public comment period. Anyone can speak. You don't have to fill out a card. There's a 4-minute time limit. If you come up to the podium, please introduce yourself. Does anybody wish to speak?
Ani LaRich, I'm a resident of Oscoda. Change of pace, a little bit lighter topic. This is somewhat of a PSA, public service announcement. But we have a deadline, and that is tonight and tomorrow night, over the next 24 hours. There's fundraising going on across the country and the world called Givingtuesday. And I represent 2 nonprofits that function in this area and the 2 counties. Those are the Pine River Van Etten Lake Watershed Coalition that handles the 400 square mile watershed for the Pine River that flows into Van Etten Lake and into the Oscoda River. And the other one is the Oscoda Valley Audubon chapter that works in both counties. Both of those organizations have been working not only with the primary mission of wildlife preservation and conservation of our resources, but also working with the schools in different ways to connect the kids to the environment so that their science that they learn in the classroom can be used in the environment. The Pine River does that by bringing kids over the last 6 years. We've been bringing kids out into the streams to sample for the insects that are the food for the fish throughout the year. And we do that twice a year, the last 6 years at 6 different sites in the Pine River watershed. We just recently expanded into Alcona because a lot of you, as you know, Pine River is significantly in the Alcona County. As far as the Oscoda Valley Audubon, we started free tours of the Kirtland's warbler. Basically, our state bird, 90% of the Kirtlands are in an area from here to Grayling. 90% of the world's population of that bird. It was endangered at one point, but it still needs a lot of work. But we think that we should make sure that our area knows, so we're doing free tours of this, and we want to get the kids out there also to know the science behind how the endangerment occurred and then what has been done to correct that. So, therefore, we're trying to raise money so that we can help the schools come out. Transportation, substitute teachers, equipment that's needed for the kids in the field and so forth. We have to pay insurance to do this and things like that. So the way that Givingtuesday works, you can go to, for the younger ones in the audience and the public that know what hashtags are, you can go to hashtag Givingtuesday, NEMI, which stands for Northeast Michigan. So that's hashtag Givingtuesday, NEMI. Or you can use a website, which is www.CFNEM, which stands for Community Foundation Northeast Michigan, up in Alpena, .org/Givingtuesday. Over the 24-hour period, you just log on, you look for the organization, a nonprofit that you're interested in, credit card, and within 2 or 3 minutes you can be done. And we're only looking for small donations, $10, $20, $5. We're looking for engagement of people, and that's what they're looking for, and it's going to help us the most. 100% of the money comes to us. Alpena Community Foundation does not take a cent, and it's all tax deductible for 501c3s.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? All right, then we're on to board comments. Does anybody have anything?
I would just mention that in addition to Mr. LaRich's suggestions, the Iosco Exploration Trail is also looking for donations under that Givingtuesday. So that's an additional place you could send a couple of bucks to.
Winter tax bills are being processed right now, and they're going to be mailed on December 1st, just in time for Christmas. If you have any questions about your bill, address change, name, spelling, that type of thing, you want to get it into the assessor's office, 739-7071. Give them a call or stop in their office. Also, December border review is coming up. Not real sure what the date is of that just yet. But that is an opportunity for you to go into the assessor's office and discuss your taxable value, homestead, those type of things, and get it adjusted before the final date. So you could be all set for that. So, or you can call the treasurer's office if you have any questions, 739-7471.
Anybody else?
Did we want to talk about the potential for a closed session on real estate or not?
For tonight?
For a subsequent date.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. We have received an inquiry regarding a piece of property that the township could be interested in. The party had asked us to respond within 1 week. The inquiry came in yesterday. So the question is, do we want to consider holding a closed session meeting, a special meeting this week to talk about that inquiry?
I could be available.
I will not be available.
Could we stay tonight? I don't think it'd be a long meeting.
I'm advised that,
Notice.
yeah.
Oh,
We have to
Yeah.
post
okay. Sorry.
18 hours.
Yeah.
I will not be able to be here any day after tonight.
Tuesday, Friday out for me. Wednesday, Thursday.
Here all week.
Here all week.
It's like, John,
I'm available all week.
Okay, so you have 5 members available for
Tuesday, Wednesday.
Tuesday or Wednesday. Is that right?
Wednesday, Thursday.
I'm sorry, Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay.
Preferably during the day.
Can you do during the day?
Yeah, any,
with a little notice, yeah. Just give me a 24 hours notice and I can do it.
Okay.
All right. Do we want to try and set something up tonight, or we can try and coordinate something after the fact and deal with it as a special meeting?
We'll do it tonight while we're all together.
yeah, seriously.
Well, we can pick a time.
Oh.
Right.
So Wednesday or Thursday better for anybody?
Wednesday in the morning would be better for me. I have a meeting in the afternoon on Wednesday.
Wednesday's good. Thursday, we have the OCC committee meeting at 10 a.m. to 11 on top of it, so that might make a little bad.
Wednesday morning good then?
Wednesday might be good.
All right, Wednesday morning,
10 to 11 or 9 to 10 or something?
Either
That's
or.
fine.
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
Okay.
I won't be here, but I'll set the time for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
How nice is it?
Thank you.
10 a.m. Wednesday.
A couple things.
Oh,
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, because I just forgot what it was.
I didn't mean to scare you. I think board members have recently, tonight maybe, read an email compilation indicating that the Iosco Road Commission has taken away the option, as I understand it, of seal coat for Colbath or any other place. Do you know anything about that?
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it.
Am I right?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because 2 weeks ago, we talked about different options and how one road might be asphalt full and the other, less traveled, might be seal coat. And they have said no more seal coat, even though they gave us a free seal coat road, the one by the furniture store, Wayne. But that's not in the cards now. I don't know why.
I don't know how they can dictate what type of road we.
Yeah, if we're
wanna pay
paying
to
for
put
it.
in.
Yeah,
I mean, if they want us to have all asphalt roads in this community or township or the county, why don't they pay 100%?
All right.
Or pay more.
Did they give a reason why?
They did not. It was a relatively brief communication, but I think it probably goes back to the rationale we talked about before in terms of durability and not that what we were doing now was going to be a pilot program, and they're probably viewing the expansion as more than a pilot. But I would need to.
Oh, because seal coat's so horrible and all these other hundreds and thousands of areas that do it, right?
All the other townships and
Yeah.
municipalities do it.
That's right.
I will talk to Mr. Boland, but I suspect it's a reaffirmation of their prior position.
Next time
you
we
don't
have
know
a
if it
meeting,
was,
we
it
should
was
have them
3
up there.
people on the road commission, 3 men. Bob, you don't know if they voted on this, it was 2 to 1 or unanimous or?
The communication I got, again, was very brief, and I'm not sure that they, I don't know. I don't
Okay.
want to speculate whether it's official or not.
All right. Do the key members of the Colbath group know this?
I believe I forwarded it, yes.
Okay, all right. I guess the second thing I would say, we had a person, public comment earlier, talk about couldn't think of any reason why medical marijuana would be any good for the town. And I would never vote for or promote medical marijuana for this reason, but it's totally kind of a superficial reason. But if people have to come to Oscoda, they might have to feed their car at a gas station or feed themselves at a restaurant or something else to get them into Oscoda. I don't think that's all bad to get people here, you know. Leave a little, few coins here. If they have to drive from Tawas or Alpena or someplace like that, you know, I can see some business for gas stations, restaurants, hardware stores, whatever. So, but again, that would be something extra, not the main cause. So.
Anything? Oh, yes.
Sorry. Was there a vote on scheduling the meeting? A vote officially, probably we should.
I'm going to make a motion that we have a closed session regarding potential real estate action on Wednesday
10 a.m.
at 10 a.m.
Support.
At what location?
Here.
Here? Okay.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes. Motion's passed. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that this weekend is the Northern Lights Christmas Parade and Community Gathering. Just as a reminder to everybody, it's, which is Saturday, December 2nd. The activities start in the afternoon, 2 p.m. There is the Reindeer Fun Run Walk that starts at Furtaw Field, goes south, someplace in the Township, does a loop, and then goes back to Furtaw Field. Again, it's just a fun, it's not really a serious race. A lot of people with baby strollers and so on last year. There is a costume contest as well. Then we also, new this year, are having ice sculptures at 3 p.m. on Dwight Street. Hopefully the forecast isn't quite as warm as it says, otherwise maybe our ice sculptures aren't going to last real long, but irregardless, we're having two different sculptures. The first one's at 3 and it'll be about an hour for each sculpture demonstration, and then we have those sculptures afterwards. 4:30 we have reindeer games, which are all for the kids, also located on Dwight Street. We'll be closing off Dwight Street similar to what happens on Bike Night, so there'll be games for the kids to play. The parade lineup itself is at 5 o'clock. You should register your votes not your votes, but your floats this year with the chamber, which is 739-7322. There's no fee to register, but we are mandating that you register the floats. And there's different categories this year, and you can there's prizes also involved. So I'm pretty excited about that. 6 p.m. is the actual time of the parade itself. The township does participate. Jamie and I usually create the float with a little help of DPW here and there, but we're working on our float soon, yes.
Oh.
Soon, yeah. But the parade starts at 6. And then following the parade itself is a free movie for kids at the Lake Theater. So the reason the movie is free is because we get sponsors from the area businesses to donate to cover the cost of the movie. So it is a free movie, and it is following the parade, which is usually around a 6:45 to 7 p.m. time frame. So, okay.
Yes.
That's it.
And is the township looking for people to walk with the?
Yep, that was gonna piggyback Ann's and ask the board members if they wanted to walk and hand out candy, and also to donate for the candy, because the township does not pay for that, so. Board members usually do.
Anything else? I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.